next speaker. Speaker number 50, Rabbi Dan Moskovitz. Apologies.
Hold on.
Who's here in person. Rabbi, please go ahead. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Moskovitz. I am a resident of Vancouver, a Canadian citizen, and the senior rabbi of Temple Shalom, a 60-year-old Jewish congregation comprised of 950 households here in Vancouver. I rise to speak in support of the adoption of the non-binding definition of anti-Semitism that has been before you. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for listening today. I've sat through long board meetings. I know how hard it is. It's been hard. It's been hard for me. It's been hard to hear and listen to such hatred and bias and grievance. Honestly, I feel traumatized by this day. 40 speakers have told me what I feel, what I experience, what my community feels and experiences is simply not true or relevant or important enough to warrant your attention. And that's really hard to hear. Really hard to hear in a week and a month where my Jewish identity has been characterized and criticized from everyone from Kanye to Saturday Night Live. So I want to make 3 points. You've heard from a number of Jewish people here opposing this measure. They state that as Jews, this measure is wrong. As individuals, they have every right to their opinions, but they do not represent the Jewish community. In fact, their opinions are statistically diametrically opposed to the opinion of approximately 85 to 90% of the Jews of Vancouver and around the world. And they are being trotted out as token Jews to confuse you on the matter. Every minority group deserves the right to define what is offensive to their own group. No other group is defined by a tiny minority of members with contrary opinions. And therefore, despite the number of self-described Jews you have heard from today, please do not tokenize us. And please recognize the overwhelming sentiments and needs of the Jewish community. There is legitimate criticism of Israel. I have engaged in it from my pulpit of my congregation and in the media. As in any democracy, people are free to speak out against policies and vote against governments that they don't agree with. Canadians, Americans, and Israelis do this all the time. IHRA does not prevent that type of political speech or action. But sometimes, as IHRA's the definition makes this clear in its first example, that criticism is not directed at Israel or Israeli policies, but it's directed at me or my congregation or all the Jewish institutions in this community. Such as when those very same anti-Semites spray painted the sidewalk outside of my synagogue, Temple Shalom, 2 years ago, with hateful and hurtful words condemning me and my congregation for Israel. That's anti-Semitism. That should be called out for what it is, because that endangers me and my community. And that is what IHRA helps to define and discern. There is no reason to spray paint a synagogue with anti-Israel messages unless you hold all Jews responsible for the actions of the Israeli government, which we are not. I am not responsible for the actions of the Israeli government and have no more influence over that government than I do over the government of Great Britain. I am not an Israeli citizen. I can't vote in Israel. I don't live or work there. But I am targeted. My children have been targeted. My synagogue building has been vandalized because I am Jewish. And one of the many forms of modern anti-Semitism conflates my being Jewish with being held accountable for the policies of a sovereign democratic state halfway around the world. That is to persecute and terrorize me because I am Jewish. And that's anti-Semitism. And that's what makes IHRA clear and what it makes clear and why I support it. And I find it necessary. So let me leave you with this powerful lesson from history. Martin Niemöller was a German Lutheran pastor born in 1892. Niemöller initially supported Hitler, rising to power, and then became disillusioned and realized that what Hitler had in store. He eventually became the leader of a German clergy group that opposed Hitler. And in 1937, he was arrested and eventually confined to 2 concentration camps. After he was released in 1945, he became a leading voice of conscience and reconciliation for the German people. And he wrote the following. First, they came for the communists, but I did not speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. We know what anti-Black racism is and anti-Asian racism is and Islamophobia. I'm out of time. We need to understand that this is anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
You have a question from Mayor Sim and another question following that. So over to you, Mayor Sim.
Thank you, Rabbi. So I have two questions for you. There's been a lot of talk about suppression of freedom of speech. If you could maybe give us some color around that and why, in your opinion, it is or is not, it shouldn't be a concern for residents of Vancouver. And also, if you can, share with us how, in your community, how adoption of IHRA will actually, promote more safety to the, we've seen a huge rise in anti-Semitic acts, like violent acts, like I think it's 731% across Canada. How will this help reduce that number, in your opinion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are tough questions. I would just say this, that having this working definition allows me or my children in public situations where anti-Semitism is not recognized as a marginal, or Jews are not recognized as a marginalized group, and anti-Semitism is not seen as a real hurt, allows us to point to it and to say, no, it really is. This is what hurts our people. I think that that's critically important. I think it's critically important in businesses where there's a diversity training, and often anti-Semitism is left off the list, or Jews are not seen as a minority or marginalized group. So I think that this definition is critically important and useful there. With regard to free speech, as I said, I don't read anything in this statement, in this definition, that prevents somebody from saying, I disagree with these policies. Israelis do it all the time. We do it in Canada all the time. There's nothing to prevent that. But if you then say to me that because you're Jewish, you're responsible for the policies of that government, that's targeting me because I am Jewish, and that's anti-Semitism. And that, as Niemöller tells us, leads to violence, and in the history of my people, it has led to murder.
Thank you. That was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you both. I will move to Councillor Kirby-Young for questions. Councillor Kirby-Young, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Rabbi, for being here to speak and for being very clear in your words. The question I have following up for you is following up on the one that Councillor Carr asked earlier about, asked the speaker and their perspective on what if we adopted the definition but not the illustrative examples. And I wonder if you can comment on how you feel about that and if you think that they are connected and intertwined or if they work separately.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I believe that the examples are critically important because, look, I'm a textual person, right? I read the Bible through commentary and through text. And it's the contextualization of statements like that that allow them to live and breathe in society. And those examples are real. I mean, the example that I gave you today could have just as easily been pulled out of that definition. These are real things that happen. I believe that without them, we limit the effectiveness of the definition. We allow people to, as they so often do throughout the history of anti-Semitism, skirt the issue and say, as we've heard today, oh, it's not really that. The examples make clear, no, that is that. And targeting an individual because of their Jewishness is anti-Semitism. And whether you connect that Jewishness to to the fact that Jews in Israel are also Jewish, or because they are Jewish and they wear a yarmulke, the same is the same.
Okay, can I follow up and ask you another question, just in an attempt to maybe help illustrate this? Sure. You mentioned anti-Asian racism, and I've been deeply troubled by that. It's something that's always existed. I think it was just more overt and grew during the pandemic. And oftentimes, Canadians and local Vancouver residents of Chinese heritage are presumed to be Chinese communist sympathizers, for example, or supporting the motherland. And there is a conflation with politics, with their identity, or with supporting those folks here at home. Do you see a parallel there?
Absolutely.
In terms of what's happening here and conflating what's becoming a very broad geopolitical discussion, it seems to me. And I don't want to put words, but just to frame the question into this conversation we're having today.
No, I absolutely do. And we experienced it here in this community during the pandemic, when Asians were held responsible, Asians in our community, for the China virus or whatever it is. That was horrible. That was tremendously painful, and it was exactly the same kind of thing, conflating these two. Yeah, I recognize what you're saying, and I think that they are very much related to each other, and I think that that is part of what we see in our society today.
And following up on that, I mean, and this might be a bit personal in sharing this, but do you see that that has the ability to spread from one community to other groups? And I'm being very honest about my personal experience. I, by extension, have been called a Chinese communist sympathizer because my husband's ethnicity is Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and your experience is real and relevant. And that kind of bias, that kind of racism, is what IHRA speaks to. Is this guilt by association, by even affinity, and it is terribly wrong and hurtful.
Sorry to interrupt. We're at time. Thank you both. We have more questions for you, Rabbi, this time from Councillor Boyle. Councillor Boyle, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, nice to see you. I am curious to hear, I guess I'm grappling with hearing some members of my family who are opposed to this categorized as sort of token Jews, and I have members on both sides of my family with very strong conflicting opinions on this, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I'm wondering, the conversation about outside of the definition, what we can do tangibly, what else we can do tangibly to be addressing safety concerns, addressing anti-Semitism. What are the other suggestions or requests or ideas you might have around tackling anti-Semitism in addition to or outside of IHRA?
I don't. I think it starts here, and we build from here. To the point about tokenism, the Jewish community is united on this. We're not a monolith, as was said early on. Jews are, as of any group, of multiple opinions, but the organized Jewish community here in Vancouver, and truthfully across the country, is organized on its need and its desire to have this resolution adopted. It has been adopted by so many bodies within this country, at the city and the provincial and even the national level. Why is Vancouver different? Why do we have to debate what hurts us in Vancouver? But in those other cities, when Jews come forward and say this hurts us, it's accepted. I don't understand that. And if I could ask a question, I would ask that to be explained to me.
Okay. But we can have this conversation other times too, and I look forward to it. But happy to hear if and where there are other instances where, as it relates to the many other powers we have, that we as a local government can be.
I would love to work with you on that.
Yeah.
Let's start here. Let's have a definition, and then we can work on how we teach that definition and how we eradicate the people that how we eradicate the actions that are in violation of that definition.
Great. Thank you both. Councillor Fry.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
So I guess I want to zero in on the I guess it's the 7th example, where it by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. I want to unpack that specific one, and I guess reading some of the comments from Amnesty International that sort of frame Israel as apartheid and in the treatment of Palestinians, and I could read some of the quotes and stuff. And I'm curious if you see that this would put a chill on criticisms like that from, largely well-respected organizations like Amnesty, if they're commenting on that situation. Do you feel that this definition and the example specifically would prevent that kind of critique, or should?
I think that it is perfectly fine to criticize and speak against the policies of any nation or any country, even more so if you're actually in that country and vote in that country. And perhaps one should be a little more circumspect when they are not and don't live under that country's rules or laws or pay taxes there or anything. That said, policies change, governments change. Canada, the United States have all done things that in their past we look back upon and we are horrified by what we have done. But that does not, at the core, invalidate the legitimacy of that country. It just says it has work to do. Israel has work to do. So does Canada. So does the United States. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a right to exist. But I'm not here to talk about Israel. I'm here to talk about the people that conflate my being Jewish with Israel and therefore endanger me and my community.
No, that's fair. I mean, it seems that the gist of a lot of the critiques seem to focus on that one example clause.
Yeah.
So, that's that's the big bugbear here.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that perspective and that yes, I think we do all have work to do.
Yeah. If I can just say, and I think I'm still answering your question, on a geopolitical level, this is complicated and complex and hard, as most geopolitics are. On a human level, it isn't. This is what hurts me. This is what hurts and endangers my community. And I need our city to stand up and say, this is not allowed. This is not right. We should stop this. We should recognize it and call it for what it is. That's what I think the council can do today by adopting this resolution.
Okay, well, with my last little bit of time here, what do you think a non-binding resolution can achieve if it's passed by the City of Vancouver?
Well, as I said before, it allows me as a tool when members of my congregation come to me and say, Rabbi, they had a diversity training at my office, and they either left Jews out or talked about how anti-Semitism, wasn't really because Jews are white and privileged and all these things. That's not really anti-Semitism. Or they used the treatment of Palestinians as the example of, horribly racist and biased policies. And then they conflated my Jewishness with that. I get that all the time. I hear that. I hear from my college students who don't feel comfortable walking on campus, who don't feel comfortable wearing a yarmulke on campus.
Rabbi, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have
That's
to.
okay. I'm just trying to answer. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And thank you, Councillor Fry and the other councillors for your questions. Sorry, we have more questions actually, this time from Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi, for taking the time and answering the questions as well. I'm going to follow up on Councillor Fry's question because I've been reading a lot about this in preparation for today, and then hearing people speak and realizing that one statement that Councillor Fry pointed out appears to be the one that has the most conflict over it in terms of the broader community. And so I'm going to just read it again. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So I think in that there is a real focus on the state of Israel. I know that you said that it's not about that. It's about anti-Semitism and people who are Jewish elsewhere. I don't know the history behind why that particular clause was put in, but I did want to ask you, what if that particular clause was not included in the motion by the City of Vancouver? Would that be problematic? You said that we need examples, but what about that specific example?
It would be problematic for me, and I think it would be problematic for the Jewish community, because to deny the legitimacy of the state of Israel to exist is to deny that Jews have a right to their indigenous homeland, to deny that Jews are in a democratic society that is, as I've said before, complicated and polarized as all democracies are, and to say, no, you can't have a nation. We have seen what has happened to Jews when we didn't have a nation. The Holocaust is one example of that, but really throughout history. But again, I'll go back to what I said before. This definition is not about Israel. The examples are that sometimes people use Israel as a way to attack Jews. And that's what that example speaks to, in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Appreciate you coming in. We are going to go to speaker 51, Gabriel Goodman.